Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Hello and welcome to the show. Today we are joined by Laila Al Yousuf and Matthew Sexton, founders of Say Studio in Dubai. Under their leadership, Say Studio has partnered with global names like LinkedIn, Apple, Google, and Siemens Energy, delivering LEED Gold workplace environments and expanding into hospitality and F&B with projects like the Grand Mercure. Their studio has designed over 3 million square feet of human-centric, sustainable spaces and recently grew into KSA with high-profile workplace headquarters. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Laila and Matt. How are you guys doing?
Thank you so much. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you guys on. So I'm pretty sure everyone sort of listening in has seen or heard of Say Studio, or at the very least seen or heard of a project that you guys have worked on. But I think it would be interesting for a lot of people listening who may not have heard of you just yet. What is Say Studio? How did you guys come together? And more importantly, what I like to share for a lot of our audience is why the need of Say Studio? What was sort of the gap you were trying to fill? What was the reason for it? What are you guys addressing in the market?
In terms of a gap, I'd say I think it's just 7 years. We've just sort of passed our 7-year mark now. So when we started the business, there weren't as many startups in the market. I think there's a lot now. There's a lot of options within the market. And when we first started, I think the sort of corporate scene was heavily dominated by large scale sort of corporate firms. So I think what we wanted to do is offer a much more human-centric kind of client-based service. And, when we did start the business, quite quickly, a lot of the people that we worked with, they knew us on a personal level. They'd sort of worked with us in the past, or they knew of us and they'd got recommendations from people. So there was an appetite in the market to work with people that really wanted to deliver not just an exceptional project, but also an exceptional service and not scrutinize on the kind of bottom line, so we didn't. And I think we made a conscious choice from the beginning not to do things like timesheets, for example. Now, of course, at some point as a business, you have to mature into these things, but we were just looking purely at the projects, making sure that we had happy clients, we had great sort of quality results, and we were building lasting relationships. So I think that was kind of what we felt was missing. And, our roles are quite different. So even though I'm a trained designer and that's what I did previously, I moved into a much more sort of business-centric role. And my relationship with a lot of our clients before became very transactional. And I had to talk to them about contracts and variations and extensions of time. And that's not the most pleasant phone call. So I think people used to see my name and be like, oh, what's he calling me for now?
No.
And even some of our clients said to us after we started the business, I did used to like you, Matt, but actually you're a really nice guy. It's because the whole dynamic had changed, So I think that's what we wanted to kind of get back to. And I think that's what the market responded to. So who are we? We're Say Studio, obviously. And
can I ask why Say? Is there a story behind that?
The kind of is. So there's a couple of reasons. So I've been fascinated by business in general and its connection to architecture and design for years and years and years. I used to pester all of my old bosses. So there was Chris Johnson in Gensler, and I remember asking him, have you gone on any sort of formal training courses to become the MD? And it's a big company, there's hundreds of people in London and there's people all over the GCC. And he kind of said, no, I just sort of organically grew into this role. And I always was interested, how do you run a business with no business training? And how do you apply sort of architectural and design knowledge successfully to a business environment? And the sort of logic for me was always that I always wanted to create something that was more of a platform. It was never going to be a name-based company. It wasn't going to be a singular kind of superstar type thing or a star architect. So when we actually originally sat down, we talked about sort of a few different variations of the name. And my name is Sexton, and this is Al Yousuf, and which is S-A-Y.
She is. Not a this, I'm a she.
But I didn't say, like,
this
what I mean?
Is Al Yousuf.
Yeah, this creature is, but yeah, it just kind of worked. So we had one iteration, and it was basically Say Design, Say Studio. And I was adamant that it had to be a .com. For some reason, I just was like, I started with like global domination. That was my mentality. So it's got to be a .com. It can't be sort of limited to AE or UK or anything like that. And it was like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it.
Yeah, it was pretty easy, actually, the naming part.
And I'd started working on a logo.
Yeah.
Because I was getting like super excited about the idea of this. And I like sort of had a stenciled logo. I had a couple of different versions, but the one that I started with, we then found a graphic designer in the UK. We worked with him and we did what all clients do. We went all the way around the houses and we came right back to the start, and he ended up doing something very similar to what we started with. So yeah, the name was pretty much solid from day one, but we never tell anyone that. Like it's not something that is any, it's not part of our documentation. It's not Sexton Al Yousuf anywhere. The idea is that, the people in the studio, they'll get the credit, that they'll get the recognition for the work that they do. So it's not, that's an intentional thing.
So I think you touched upon something which is quite interesting, which I think a lot of designers and a lot of early founders or early principals might even find interesting, which is the both of you have very distinctively different roles.
Yeah.
Obviously, Laila, you being more on the design side of things, Matthew, you being more on the managerial side of things. So typically in projects, what I've found is that in order to deliver a project well, or let's say beyond client expectations, there's a very fine line between, do we do another option, but we've not really built for these hours. But I know that if we do that extra option, it'll really, really, kind of tie everything together. It would, really make the client happy. It would, kind of long-term give dividends in a way, but it might be a short-term loss on the books at the moment because it would be that much more resource time, etc. So between the both of you, who kind of raises the red flag, or do both of sort of just mutually agree on it?
So I manage that side of things, and we do that sort of collectively as a group. So we've obviously got softwares now that tell us kind of where we are, but prior to that, before we had any of that kind of technology, there's a gut feel that goes into it as well. And then also Laila would just deceive me in certain ways, and she just wouldn't tell me. So I like that. Do you know what I mean? I like the fact that Laila would sort of go above and beyond, but also it would be somewhat outside. Don't ask, don't tell. Do you know what I mean? So I think we were in PwC's offices, and I always use this example, but we were in the lift lobbies, and normally our scope is the tenant areas. So anything core related is nothing to do with us, and because we have to go to the landlord for different approvals and that kind of thing. So I said, oh, this is different. This is not a standard Emaar Square lift lobby. It's really nice. Who did it? And she was like, we did it. And I was like, oh, okay. So how did I not know about this, Laila? And I kind of like that dynamic. Laila's sort of focus 100% is making sure the client is happy. And that's what I want her to do. And that's what I want the team to do. I want to sort of interject only when it's absolutely necessary. And I think that kind of creates the right balance. So it's my responsibility at the end of the day. And we say we're not a business that scrutinizes every single dirham. And we know sometimes that certain projects are going to be a labor of love. And I think one of the things that we've committed to as well is that if we sign up, we're signed up. So if it starts to go south and we're losing money, we won't try to retract. We won't try to, variation hunt. Of course, if there's additional scope, but that's something slightly different. But it's like, look, we've made a commitment to the client that we're going to deliver something, so we will deliver it. And if we're going to lose money doing it, so be it. And I think that's been apparent since day one, and it's, as true today as it was then. So, and I think we'll maintain that as well. As long as the overall picture is still positive, of course, right. You can take some losses along the way.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, my kind of approach to it is, as he said, is leading by design and what I feel like is best for the project and best for the client. And sometimes I just think, it's too much kind of hassle to go through the whole process of like, this isn't within the scope and ask for a variation. And it just puts like kind of a negative sort of damper on the interactions with the client. So if it's something small and I think that we can do it in a clever way, I'll just take it on. We'll just do it. We just never really had that kind of approach of, no, this is the line and there's no way we're crossing the line. We try to meet people kind of halfway if there's another way that we can go about it. But then I would also say to clients, I mean, maybe this was more at Perkins, but I would say to clients, okay, I'll do this for you, but don't tell Matt that I've done this, And then he may or may not know it's actually happened, but they always appreciated that. They'd always, kind of laugh like, shh, we won't tell, just do it anyway. So, and yeah, there would be little things like that. And it wouldn't be a matter of like, a whole bunch of extra drawings or a bunch of extra visuals. It was always something that I saw, it's like an easy win. Let's just do it. So we've sort of kind of led with that kind of philosophy in the past. And yeah, I mean, as Matt said, there's definitely been a lot of projects not a lot, but there have been projects along the way that we know that we're losing money in the process of it. And the only thing that I ever say really is I just want clients to be respectful. Yeah. That's my number one thing.
And that drives everything, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've got a respectful client, I always try to, sorry to cut you off there, but I always try to put myself in their position, and they've procured a service and it's a service that they can't do for themselves. So they trust, their partner. And if things go wrong slightly, it's not necessarily always the client's fault. So you kind of always scrutinize the numbers. And of course, clients hate the word variation for, obvious reasons. People don't want to pay more. But at the same time, you have to evaluate the situation and sort of see, why has this happened? And is it going to improve the project? And is it necessary? And how much is it going to cost? And ultimately make a considered decision. But yeah, I've always, and we've done this like since Perkins and Will, like I understand design. I appreciate design. I can design. But I understand that this business is a design consultant. So designers should be removed to an extent from the business aspect, and they should be what the client really engages with. So they shouldn't have the responsibility of having those conversations. So I don't mind when things start to kind of digress a little bit, as long as someone is in the background kind of going, yeah, we're okay there. It's fine. But like Laila said, on the basis that our clients are respectful, that is the foundation of everything.
Yeah. But if you've got a project that you're losing money and the client's not respectful, that becomes quite challenging to move forward with. But we finish them all. It's just, I don't think that it's too much to ask for clients to be respectful and just be respectful to our team.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
You'll know yourself as a designer. It's a labor of love, right? And it's a very emotional endeavor. And I think interiors, architecture interiors, all of them, it's not like you just produce something at the drop of a hat. You've got to sit and you've got to think, and it's personal to, an individual or a team. And when it's kind of dismissed as though, oh no, this is wrong, give me another option or something like that, it's actually quite painful sometimes. Like when I was, not everyone's the same, but when I was a designer, I used to get really upset. And I know some people do, and some people are more disconnected from the process, but I took it quite personally, and I found that quite difficult. So it's kind of like after a certain amount of time, it can kind of beat it out of you. You know what I mean? So if a client's appreciative and respectful, we'll kind of go above and beyond for them.
No, that is true. I was having a conversation with a couple of developers off late, and they kept asking, we work with these consultants and architects and designers and so on. How do we get them to do, just a little bit more for us, just a little bit more? And I told them something which in the moment seemed quite arbitrary, and I was kind of just, fluffing along basically. But essentially what I said was, as long as you are respectful and you pay your designers on time, whether you ask them or not, I guarantee they're going to go above and beyond for you. And they were like, really, is it that simple? I'm like, yeah, quite literally. Just be a nice dude and pay your bill when it's due, and you will get that extra render or that extra option or, that extra exploration for a facade or whatever it may be. And you'll get it happily.
Yeah.
There won't be any teeth pulling or nothing. So it's kind of weird that that's all it takes, I think.
And it's bizarre that people don't understand that. Like the sort of, the carrot and the whip. Like so many clients apply the whip, and you just think, what do you think is going to happen? Like when you berate the design team, do you think they're going to go away and go, do you know what? I really want to do more for this client. And of course not. They're going to go and complain and say, I don't want to do calls. I don't want to do meetings. Like I'm intimidated. It makes me feel anxious. And you just think, are you going to get the best results from someone if that's the environment? No. And the fact that most people, or certainly a lot of people, don't seem to get that, you just think, how?
Yeah, makes sense. I did want to pivot a little bit more into a bit more of the technical aspect of design, which is you guys clearly do a lot of workplace, which is awesome. I'm a bit curious though, when you have, sort of world-renowned clients, the likes of, LinkedIn, for example, and so on, I'm assuming that dealing with that kind of a brand and that kind of a corporate entity, is it fairly straightforward to get a single decision maker, or is there normally an entire sort of board with their agendas, kind of driving the design? Because I would imagine that, quote unquote, the more cooks there are in the kitchen, it becomes more difficult to sort of deliver the vision.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering for you guys, especially with these larger brands that probably have a DCR and things like that already, or some kind of identity, how is it working with those kind of clients as compared to someone who's, say, just starting up?
Yeah. It's interesting actually, because if you think about it, LinkedIn, Facebook, Google, all of these clients, they operate in a similar kind of sphere, right? And what I mean by that is that they are international, blue chip, well-known brands. Structurally, they're set up in similar ways. You've got like a global team, and then generally you might have a local team. Seems to be kind of the commonalities between them, but they're all very different from each other. Although there's a similar structure, they are different from each other. Google, for example, has their corporate teams, and there is involvement at the local level, but the balance is different. And then if you look at like when we did HPE, that balance was slightly different. LinkedIn, the balance was also a little bit different. I think a lot of the main PwC, for example, so same thing, like there's a global team, but the balance is always slightly different from one to another. There will generally be guidelines, but then again, sometimes they will say, well, they're just kind of loose and you don't have to follow them explicitly. There are certain things that we need to follow from a functional perspective, but there's a little bit more scope when it comes to kind of the design creative side of it. So for example, let's take Google. Google example, they've got lots and lots and lots of guidelines. And if you go into each of their offices, their micro kitchens, for example, operate in very similar ways from one office to another, but the look of it will be very different. And that is the play of the kind of localizing the elements there. They want all their offices to feel different. If you go into Facebook, it's a bit more international in the sense of like, or, more of the corporate sort of, it's strange to even say that Facebook is corporate, but what I mean by that is that their offices generally look quite similar to each other and they operate exactly the same as each other. So the dynamic is a little bit different from place to place. And it can become a challenge sometimes because sometimes there's a bit of politics going on between the global team and the local team. The local team maybe in some ways is a bit more accessible. So the global team has to kind of be involved in the process a little bit more. So we'll quite often have like weekly conference calls where everybody's on those calls. So everybody knows how the project is progressing, but the balance sometimes is different. The global team might be more involved. So yeah, there are some similarities, but generally the balance is slightly different. And so the way that we progress with each of them could also be a little bit different from one to another. But ultimately, I think any client, the ambition is always the same. There's a functional element that I really enjoy with corporate design because it's a bit more than, it's not just, other types of design, of course, as well, but something about the fact that these people are in this space for the majority of their day, the majority of their week. You need to look at like the ergonomics of the space, the health and well-being of the people that are there, the functional aspect, because this business has to make money, the one, that you're working for. So there's something about that part that for me is like really intriguing. I call it the science behind the design. And I find that it's like a giant puzzle every single time we start a project. And I love like working on the layout and trying to fit all of the pieces together. And I get really big kick out of like, oh, we want to do this and this and this. I'm like, oh my God, how are we going to make that happen? And then when you kind of feel all the pieces fall into place, like, okay, this makes sense and this can work. But yeah, from all of them sort of have this shared kind of element of that there is generally some sort of, a goal that we need to figure out of how to achieve, whether they're a blue chip or whether even on, a smaller firm that's maybe just operating out of Dubai, local firm.
Yeah, from a sort of business perspective, I think as we've expanded into new sectors, we've realized the differences between them. So we've done, much more hospitality. We've done architecture, F&B, and residential, pretty much all sectors, but mostly hospitality and workplace. And I think what we realized about workplace is the structure. And I think that is actually fantastic. And we're really lucky to have that because usually what you get is projects are initiated by a global workplace team and they've done offices all over the world. So they know what the expectations are. They know the REBA stages. They know the budget. It's usually set before the project's initiated. So we're going into a predetermined, well-structured kind of environment. So I think that helps the design be better because we're not sort of distracted trying to figure out simultaneously kind of what's going on. So, but there are distinct differences. And Laila mentioned, Google and Facebook, et cetera, they're all tech, but we do a lot of law firms. We've got technology clients, we've got Siemens Energy. So we've got renewable kind of energy clients that they're all different. They all want the best globally. There's a competitiveness to them. This is our office. So we want it to represent the best version of who we are combined with,
and a lot of times it's a regional headquarters. The Dubai office will be a regional headquarters. So it's being looked at on a global level. It's got a lot of eyes on it.
And when we worked with Siemens Energy, there were a lot of eyes on that project. So, the project lead locally, he was reporting up chain to, some of the sort of global CEOs, and they wanted to do the best office they've ever done globally. And that sets a certain expectation. And they wanted to, like, when we interviewed, it was like, we want this to win awards. And you can, like, straight away, the bar is there,
Yeah, the ones that I've had a few of those wherein the client's been like, the design's got to win awards. And I'm like, yes, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, working with, the kind of clients that we do. And again, you don't realize because we stepped out of a very large brand sort of business that we naturally had that experience and it just continued on to say. But, when you work with clients that aren't as large scale, there's different challenges. But like I said, that structure's, it's really comfortable. The only challenges I think that we really face is that a lot of our clients,
they don't let us.
We sign NDAs with everyone. So
no one knows what we worked on and we can't see it and we can't go back to it. And sometimes you can't even put it up for awards. It becomes a project that you worked on that no one will see and you can't talk about. And that's a bit challenging. But another thing that I really love about it is the timeline. So because they all have a move out date and a move in date, they're tied to this timeline and fit out's fast. So what it means is that every single year, it's like a whole new set of projects. So you don't have these, we don't have, we do have some, but generally most of our projects are within that kind of year time frame. So that means that the next year it's a whole other set and next year it's a whole new set. And it also gives us the ability of building out a portfolio pretty quickly. Absolutely.
I mean, when you actually look at our portfolio, the profile document that we present to clients, sometimes you go, wow, like we've done all of this and it's only been 7 years. I mean, it's like well over 100 projects. And it's like every single year, it accelerates. And, you know, the good thing about Dubai is as well is if you go to London, for example, because that's where the purse strings are, if you like, things can be a little slower there. But whereas here, once they've hit that button, there's a process. So it goes from, you know, the global real estate team, then it will go to the local sort of leasing team. So it goes to, you know, for example, CBRE or JLL or any of the other teams, Savills, etc. They'll find the space, but the clock's already ticking, right? So they'll find the space, they sign the lease,
already
then
late
they float
before
the
you
RFP.
start.
Yeah, and then
How?
there's a project manager appointed, the RFP gets floated, we interview, we're onboarded, and they go, right, guys, we're 3 months behind schedule.
Yeah.
So
We've
what
got
are
to
we
figure
going
out
to
how
do?
to make up the time. I'm like, what? Wait.
But it's a challenge, but it's cool. Do you know what I mean? Like we always manage to get it done. It is. I always say that like you've got to be a certain type of personality to work in the Middle East because it's high pressure, but high reward. And if you enjoy that and if you respond to that, you'll do really well. And if not, you'll leave really quickly.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I went to this like wellness event a couple weeks ago and we were talking about how similar we all were. And I was like, we are basically like a lot of the, you know, the same kind of personality. I think a lot of us are driven by a lot of the same things. So when we talk about how fast things are and how busy we are, there's one factor that it's our personality. And we have actively sought that out in a way. And we've brought that into our own lives. And another factor, which I think is the Dubai factor. Everything is just so fast here. So we've got clients that are in other parts of the world and have actually said to us, can you slow down? We can't keep up with you. Like, oh, but this is just the pace of Dubai. You know, we're so used to this kind of rhythm, but they're not used to it. And we're only then really become aware of how fast we move when you step outside of it. I mean, I remember when I had my eldest daughter and I went on maternity leave for a few months and then I came back and, you know, I'd been in this world for years and years and years, right? But I had stepped out for maternity leave. I remember the first week that I came back, I was like, oh my God, this is fast. But I knew this world, right? It was my world. And I think the timing, you know, I always say when you become a mother, there's no like start or end to time. It's just like one rolling clock. There's no weekday, there's no weekend, there's no morning, there's no night. It's just like one rolling clock. And then you come back into the world of where we are with interiors and fit out. And it's just boom, 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 fast, fast, fast. And everything has a definition. So yeah, you forget about it when you're just so used to working that way.
I do think there is an archetype that is attracted to this market.
Yeah.
All the factors that you said. I think most of the people who I like to call sort of the A players, right? They tend to be quite driven.
Yeah.
They tend to be quite, you know, like you say, enjoy the pressure to an extent. Addicted to the pressure. It's like when there's a downtime, what do I do?
Yeah.
I got to find work to do.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, actually. I've never really thought of it that way, but it is true. Everyone who I can think of who I'd be like, you know, yeah, I would love to work with them. Their work's good. They all kind of have a very similar character trait.
Yeah.
Though in this process, I think it is important to point out that we don't give enough space to the wellness side of it, you know, like, well, yeah, the creativity part, especially, I think that's a very good point because creativity is not like a button that you push, you know, like, oh, be creative right now, go into a brainstorming room and deliver something. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes I think, you know, you could work on a spreadsheet, you come to the end of a spreadsheet, but you could work on a design for years and never really get to where you want to go with it, you know, unless you have a deadline.
No designer ever finishes.
Yeah, you don't finish. You can
really.
keep tweaking. But the thing that I was going to say is because we're in this world and you're right, we are the same kind of archetype and we're all driven by a lot of the same things. We forget to give ourselves space and we forget to give ourselves time and we forget to take care of ourselves. And I think that's become sort of more apparent to me, like particularly myself in the last kind of couple of years, because even that, like when I'm not here, I'm just so driven by like all of these little projects, other projects that I just need to keep busy all the time. And then if you think about it, like if you look at like meditation is all about like sitting with yourself and doing nothing else. And it's so hard. It's so hard to do that because we're driven the way that we're driven. And if I'm sitting there laying in bed at night about to go to sleep, my brain is still thinking about 100 other things that I need to do at work or I need to do at home. It's hard to kind of shut off and find the space of just relaxing.
And I think it's hard to be around as well. Like my wife finds it very difficult sometimes. Like, so if I've got time, I get very sort of wound up very quickly and I start pacing around the house and it's like, please go to the gym, do something, get out, like expend that energy because it's always going. Do you know what I mean? It's always on. down. And she always says to me, you've got to figure out how to relax.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to do that because, like, you know, what you said, I woke up this morning at about, I think it was about, I don't know, 2:00 in the morning. And the first thing I thought about was like the variation and, you know, this project and what was going on with this. And I got my phone out and I started looking at things. I was right, I need to think about something else that's not design related, that's not business related. Otherwise I won't go back to sleep. And that's always happening. Do you know what I mean? And I think people do need space sometimes, and they need to remember that and we say this a lot in the office, like, nobody's going to die. You know, we're not saving lives at the end of the day. This is the level of importance that's placed on the project can be sort of the perception is that it is the be all and end all. And it's not. Realistically, it's not. We want to do a great job, but we don't want to sort of affect people's lives as a consequence. We want them to be happy. And a friend of mine, you know, we've sort of started doing, not as regularly as I'd like, but we're doing sort of staycations out the city. And it feels like as soon as you drive out of Dubai, because Dubai is like a melting pot. As soon as you drive out of Dubai and the buildings are gone and it's just sand dunes, everything just goes, oh, this is nice. And you do a couple of days in the mountains or whatever, and you come back and you just feel like, I actually feel relaxed. I feel like I can go to work on Monday and be effective, but it just doesn't happen enough, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that as business owners as well, like there's all the pressures of the project, but then there's the pressures of the company and the dynamics of the people inside of it. So, you know, while the people in the studio are aware of the projects, there's a whole other thing that we're always talking about, like nonstop. You know, I will be here, sitting here for however many hours in the day, get in the car, call him, and then just keep talking until we both get home or whatever. And yeah, there's this whole thing of the switching off. I try to do that when I go home. My husband has said to me, please, can you leave your work-life drama at work, come home and let's just talk about other things that are not work related. But I do think that as individuals, there needs to be like some kind of a release from work. And that's another reason why we work so well together, is there's like this like complete trust, you know, and I can say anything to him and I know he will say anything to me, and I'm not. Yeah, of course, we argue, we fight, we get upset with each other at times, but it's like a brother-sister relationship. We go right back to where we were. It's completely fine. I would rather that he be honest with me and tell me exactly what he's thinking, and then we talk about it and move on. You know, but there's this kind of ultimate trust in that. And we lean into that to be able to sort of release all of the pressures and the emotions that come from the day to day.
Yeah, 100%. I think anyone who's listening kind of get that from the both of you. I think if that wasn't the case, it would be very difficult to achieve what you guys have achieved in such a short period of time, because you kind of need that intensity, so to speak, but then you also need that level of understanding as well. You know, you can't just go that hard, that long without really having these pauses and breaks in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important, right, for what we do. You know, we try to incorporate all of this in the projects that we work on as well.
Yeah.
So the whole mindfulness aspect of it, I think it's an ongoing thing that we need to work on ourselves as well to make sure that we're doing it.
True. I actually really relate to what you said, Matt, because I think I have the same problem that you do, which is I need to expend energy.
Both are like Dalmatians.
My wife always says I'm typically the happiest and the calmest when I'm in the desert. And typically summers are rough for me because it's just too hot to get out there. Although I do tend to sneak in a few even in the summer. But yeah, I've found that the dunes typically are the place where it really quietens down for me. And most of the times, wherever I go, there's no cell reception. So it's even better.
Do you feel like it's the fact that it's the sand dunes, or it's the fact of connecting to nature? Like, and that's just the nature that we have here?
I think it's a bit of that. I think there's definitely a grounding sort of thing that happens. I think the landscape completely changing, the different tones and lights, the whole sort of, I mean, as much as I'm not really tied to a desk most of the time, but just feeling the circadian rhythm, I think also sort of does something.
Yeah, for sure.
And just the fact that it's quiet. You know, there's no notification going off. There's no doom scrolling that I'm doing. It's easy to get bored, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I found initially the first few days, I'm like, God, oh my God, what about that email? What about this? What about this? But then typically on the second day, I'm like, you know what? The world's fine. Everyone's going to move on. No one's going to die.
But we've, you know, we're indoors all of the time, and we are, like you said, stuck to desks all of the time. But as individuals, we are people that we need to learn how to be with ourselves, you know, and that's something that we've gotten away from because we're constantly being distracted by technology. And we have one of the girls in the office here, and I always find this fascinating when she does this every year, but she goes on a silence retreat where basically I think it's like 10 days or something like that, and nobody speaks. So you just there all day meditating, and you don't speak, and you're completely disconnected from technology. technology. And I would think like that has got to be one of the hardest things that you would do. But it is the moment that you are most connected to yourself. Why is it so hard for us to connect to ourselves and for us to find that space?
I mean, I think as well, like obviously the nature thing is massive and we all know about that. And I think that's well documented. But I think the impact technology is having is not as well understood as maybe it will be in the future. And I think like I always used to love, there was a couple of places where I feel much more calm, which is the gym. And when I'm on a treadmill or when I'm lifting weights or whatever, I can't look at my phone.
Yeah.
So my mind is clear. And I do a lot of my like business thinking when I'm in the gym. And I used to love flying because I'd never get reception on a plane, but you do now. And I do a lot of work on planes and we've done calls where I've been on the plane like halfway through.
I don't do that. You should just not do that.
But the thing is, when you can have it, you kind of, you do it.
If you can, you'll kind of find a way to do it. I suppose if you have no option in your mind, also you're like, well, I couldn't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have that option, it becomes a bit tricky, I feel.
But I've recently, and I say very recently, probably about 2 to 3 weeks, I've deleted all of social media off my phone. I've got an iPad, so I've got it on that. And the first couple of days, I forgot completely that I even had it. Like, and we've got a business account for like Instagram and I need to look at that and things, and obviously LinkedIn. But then even when you go on them, you realize that there's not really that much interesting content there. You're just kind of addicted to this, how many likes and how many followers, and it's not really that important. What's important is what we talked about at the beginning, which is the projects that we do, the clients that we have, delivering, exceptional work, not putting a post up. I mean, 10 years ago, I remember I completely dismissed social media. I now know obviously it's more relevant and important, but it doesn't really make a difference to my life. So I'm trying really hard to sort of disassociate, be more present, give more time to my son and my wife and my work. That's not completely like we're pulled in so many different directions all the time, and it's getting worse, not better. Because we notice with our staff, and people kind of refer to me as like the old sort of technophobe, I suppose, in some ways, because I'll do WhatsApp, I'll do emails, and I'll do calls. That's it. I refuse to do anything else. So if someone sends me a Teams message, I'll never look at it. I've got like a point. It's not like I understand what it is, but I'm not going to jump between multiple versions of technologies to communicate with someone that I could just go, we're in the same office. Do you know what I mean? Right. Yeah. But nowadays they're jumping between, I don't know, TikTok and Snapchat and Teams and this and that. And you're just like, how do you even keep up?
It's too much. And you forget where you communicated with somebody as well.
You do sound like the old school. And I was talking to someone yesterday and we had a good old moan about, the way it used to be and how we were trained. And But the thing is, I'm sure the generation before us moaned about us and it will continue. It's a cycle, but I do feel sorry for it.
It makes me nervous though that people are becoming so connected. I mean, we're going way off topic maybe, but the people are so connected to their phones that they don't speak to each other. No. I mean, who are we as a civilization if we can't communicate to each other? And I've read about people who get anxiety picking up the phone and just having a conversation with someone. I think a lot of the newer generations are having that issue, which is strange that people would prefer to just WhatsApp or send an email or something, and we're losing this dynamic of being able to even communicate with each other.
I quite literally yesterday had this conversation with one of our junior designers where he was kind of struggling to put this email together, and he's like, oh, but is this right? I want to be like, I'm like, yeah, just pick up the phone and call the guy. I mean, it's like a 2-minute conversation. And he was like, oh dear. like you could see the dread in his eyes. Like, oh my God, I got to talk to him. Why can't I just email him? Wow, that is, but that is exactly what it is.
The importance of those phone calls, I think this is another thing, right? Like if we go back to clients and client relationships, we spend too much time behind screens and dialed into conference calls that we are losing that design is personal, right? Like even if you're designing for a corporate, it's still it's not, I don't want to say intimate necessarily, but it's like, it's quite raw and you're exposed because you created something that came from your mind, from your heart. You've put yourself into it. Somebody's then going to judge it. And then you're trying to design for someone. So you've got to get into the psyche of that company or of that person. So it is like a very exposed kind of relationship. But for me, I'm one who values relationships and I like to build, those bonds with clients like years later. I've got clients that we've got
built on it.
Yeah. I mean, we've got clients that we designed for, 10 years ago that we're still in contact with regularly. We've got clients that we're actively been designing for 10 years that we still work with today. And then it doesn't come across in Teams the same way. It doesn't come across, in emails and WhatsApps the same way. You need that kind of face to face. And I just worry that the newer generations are coming in with a level of anxiety of building those connections. And so then where are we going?
We're kind of missing out, I think, as well. I think part of the reward of what we do is the relationships that we build.
Yeah.
And I've got relationships that are basically the foundation of this business. People that we'd worked with in the past in project management, and Laila with some clients, and they came to us because they know us, and we had those relationships. But I meet with people for lunch, and I think that we there's one person in particular that I'm thinking of, and I won't mention any names, but we've been meeting for probably 8 or 9 years, and I don't think we've once discussed work, and we're both in the same field, and that person would be a work giver. But it's not the point. The point is to maintain strong relationships. Yeah, the point is to maintain, strong relationships. But I think also here in particular, most people, like Laila's obviously Emirati, so her family's here, but my family's in the UK, my extended family. So your sort of colleagues become your family, not in a cliche way, because, ultimately we are work colleagues, but you spend a lot of time with people from your industry. So having those relationships, it's so rewarding. It's necessary. And I feel sorry for people.
I mean, you're right. It's part of the fun, right? Like I enjoy getting to learn about a client personally and getting to understand what's important to them in their lives outside of the job and connecting with them, having dinners with them, going out with them, whatever. I think it's actually, it's a big part that makes the whole thing fun, because ultimately, we want to enjoy our time with our clients. We want for those meetings to be fun. We want for the clients to want to work with us again. And I think it comes across probably naturally with us in a few ways. And we encourage that with the team that we've got. I don't know why, but I do know why, but I used to bring a bell to my meetings, and it was just a joke, but if I felt like someone was talking too much, I would stop them. Yeah, that's the irony, right? I'm the one who needs the bell, but it was just kind of fun. Or we would do like kind of the workshops in the beginning, and there would always be games involved, and just try to make the process fun as well. I mean, why not? Like we spend most of our time doing this, and when people feel comfortable with you, I think that they are more open to to sharing, and you'll get a successful project out of it.
Yeah, there's a bit more, there's something which I think is a bit more tactile as well, which is I am going to make an assumption that a lot of the work that you guys have done or won and then completed, you probably were not bidding against a lot of people. And this was probably clients who came to you and said, listen, we like you, we want to work with you. And that was kind of how it went down?
No,
mixture.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a combination. I think, if we go back to the kind of the original sort of story of, say, like when we were at Perkins, me and Laila, I would always sort of, part of my role was to win work, and I had to kind of assemble a team, and I'd always want to take Laila with me because the dynamic worked really well. But that usually happens in the first interview. So most of what we do, it kind of comes through strong relationships with project managers in the market, and they know us, and they'll formulate lists, and they go out to various different designers. You go through a technical and commercial process, and then you interview, and the interview is the magic, and that's where you really get to kind of understand if this is going to work, and you're right for them and they're right for you. And you normally walk out the room and go, yeah, that one's going to be for us. And sort of 7-8 times out of 10, you're right about those things. So that's normally the way it works. But then there is the occasion where someone's been to one of our projects, or they've seen something online, and they want us, and they'll come to us and say, look, we have to go through a process, because again, our clients are corporate entities, and they need to show that they've gone to at least 3 bidders
and done a lot of like due diligence along the way.
They have to, and there's a threshold usually, and it's quite low. So if they go above, let's say $20,000 or something like that, they have to show that they followed that kind of process. But sometimes they will come and say, we want you guys, so we'll figure this out. Nothing unprofessional would ever happen, but we know that they want us, and that kind of relationship's already kind of pre-formed.
It's a mixture, but it probably primarily is a normal tender process, just like everybody else would have to go through, because like you said, that's part of their corporate mandates that they've got to go through it. And so we just get included on a tender list just like everyone else.
The only reason I sort of bring that up is because I've found, because of the pace that we work at over here, I think those relationships kind of tie in to the factor of overall trust in the individual, and then by extension, the brand and the team and so on.
100%.
And that trust is very hard to sort of instantly get, especially in a first interview, for example. So I think, at least I've seen with a couple of other studios, is that those relationships that they've formed over time in one way or another kind of, to an extent, secure work?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, we do the first one. There can be relationships that, pre-exist the first engagement, but the process 100% needs to be followed. But, we've delivered projects with PwC in Dubai, in Jordan, in Kuwait, in Cairo. I did some work with them in Riyadh. So that was kind of almost like a framework. We've done multiple jobs with Google over spanning 10 years.
Well, yeah, because we had a relationship with them from Perkins.
And the relationship with those clients, if they stay constant, which often they do, which is fantastic, it goes way beyond just the project delivery. It's like,
but a lot of them, we still tendered. We still had to tender.
You have to tender.
And I think that the way that they look at it is, okay, we've worked together already. You know what we're looking for. It was a successful project. It was in budget. It like ticked all of the boxes. You made our lives easier, like this kind of thing. And so it just, if the price is right, then it just makes sense to continue that relationship. But yeah, we most of them probably we still had to tender.
And the other thing as well that I always said is important for clients from our perspective is that they look forward to our meetings. Because if I'm a lawyer and I'm going to be reviewing contracts for 4.5 days of the week, the meeting where I'm going to see something visual, I'm going to get to touch some materials. It's very tactile. Like that's going to be a cool part of my day. Do you know what I mean? So they should look forward to that. It should be a pleasant engagement. It should be something that they enjoy and they want to repeat, as opposed to something that's contentious. And there's a lot of sort of friction along the way. So just making the whole process, not just the end result. I think the end result is sort of almost a given to an extent. Like, you go to consultant A, B, C, or D, they can all do the job. I think anyone that thinks otherwise is completely misguided, but it's about the journey towards getting to the end result. And if a client enjoys that, then they're going to want to work with you again and again and again.
We did, I remember at Perkins, we did these like awards that were for fun. And it was, people got like, who's best dressed and who's most late and who's all this. I got the one for the most meetings because I was like, I'm always basically in meetings. And I think a lot of that is just my personality, that I'm very giving of my time. I enjoy.
That was one of the things that I used to, because we'd sit down on the Friday and I'd be like, Laila, this is when it was very sort of corporate and it was like, you've got an hour, right? No more. Yeah. I want you to leave and I want you to come back within the hour. And I'd be like,
no, but I'm talking about client. Oh, you mean, to go meet with clients.
Meetings.
Yeah. Because they were all face to face. So I would go and meet with clients
in the olden days.
And, go for lunch after, or, I mean, that didn't necessarily happen all of the time, but the meeting would go longer because you're connecting with that person. And honestly, I think that that's actually, we talk about working here in the region. I feel like that's a big part of our culture here as well. That kind of hospitality element and the relationship building element. I think it's a big part of Dubai. And I want for the people in our team to feel like they're not so pressured by time that they, it's 1 minute over, we've got to go, jump onto a next call. I think we need to, it's hard to do, but just to leave a little bit of space to try to connect with our clients on a more, one-to-one level.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. I kind of, at this point in the episode, then I think we've all sort of gotten a good understanding about what, the core principles are at Say Studio, what motivates you, what drives you. It would be interesting to see, because I'm pretty sure you've given this some thought, Matthew, which is what is the next step or the next sort of goal or the vision for the future, say the next 2 to 5 years or something long term. What are you guys working towards?
So things change, and I think it's important to accept that things change. So when we started, my goal was biggest firm in the world. It was really simple. Like that's what I wanted. That's what I repeated over and over and over again. And the reason was I met Art Gensler a number of years ago, who's the founder of Gensler, and he told me a story and it resonated. And I was just like super impressed by, his presence and what he'd achieved and the sort of legacy aspect of Gensler and the fact that his children and grandchildren all sort of work for the same company. And I was like, I want that. Like, that's what I want to create. I want to build a business that's global. That's hard. So I think, sort of realistically, we have offices in obviously the UAE, and we've got one in Saudi. We've talked about offices in Europe, which would be super cool to do. But we're also very conscious of going past that point where you go outside of I hate the word boutique, but it's probably the right word. You go past that sort of boutique attitude as a business. So I think, whatever we do and wherever we go, it would still be maintaining small individual offices that offer that same level of service and sort of potentially move them to different parts of the world. There are some really cool places, Singapore's awesome, Hong Kong's awesome. There's parts of the UK that are really, really cool to work in. But of course, it presents lots and lots of challenges. And I think we've learned more in the last 18 months with Saudi, particularly, myself, when it comes down to, tax and, withholding tax and contractual terminologies and just engaging with clients on a different work week, which obviously didn't used to be an issue, but since we've moved to Monday to Friday, that presents a fairly big issue. Arranging, flights on a very sort of last minute basis. All of these things play into managing a business on a day-to-day basis, and it's really, really tough. I think one of the things more recently that we've started to look at is expanding the scope of the business outside of what we do, which is something that we're looking at the moment. So it's design related, but it's not specifically consultancy services. So I think it's interesting to expand your kind of horizons instead of just staying in one lane. And I think one of the reasons why I've sort of recently been speaking to one of my old colleagues, and he's moved into a tech business, and it's more like a side venture, but it's just interesting to look at different things that are sort of linked, but they're not 100% dependent. And I think that's something that we're going to be exploring in the next sort of, 6 months or so.
So when you say other avenues, I'm assuming it's different verticals, but within the same sort of design ecosystem. Yeah. So kind of design a piece of furniture, lighting product,
something along those lines. Yeah.
Right.
I think the combination that works well for us is a passion for design, a passion for people. And from my perspective, I actually do genuinely have a passion for business. So it's got to combine those things. Yeah. Else, I don't think we'd have the success.
Yeah. Makes sense. Well, awesome. At this point of the episode, we have something that we call the aForm tradition, which for our listeners, they're probably well aware, but a bit of a surprise to you, which is it's basically a question that's been asked by a previous guest, completely blind. Sometimes these are, just for a bit of fun, and sometimes they're quite philosophical, I must say. So quickly pull up your question today. It's a fairly straightforward one. The question that you have is, and this is open to the both of you.
You'll get different answers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Feel free to answer it in any which way. So the question.
Can you tell us after who asked the question, who it was?
I could.
You just have to listen to the episode.
No, but I mean,
it's part of the episode, right? Or no?
No, it is. It is
okay,
part of the episode.
So you can find out.
Or you could tell me.
Just be told.
You could tell me.
So
I could tell you. I mean, we could break a few rules here and there, but yeah. So the question that you guys have is, if you have to design the house of Elon Musk, what would the theme and the vision be? Exclamation mark, avoid tech. So I don't know, with Elon Musk and not having tech, like, what do you do? Like, do you just give him like a sandpit?
I'm actually fascinated by Elon Musk, and I've read a couple of books about him because this is probably terrible to admit, but I relate to a lot of the things that he does. And I know that he's very polarizing. So some people will hate him and some people will love him.
I'm not
and there's no in between. But
so
what
we
he's
would definitely design
is
different places.
Incredibly impressive. And his drive and, his work ethic is unbelievable. He clearly has some issues. I think what I would do, I would design something that is incredibly related to nature, because he's so tech focused that I'd take all of that away and I'd give him like a sanctuary so he could actually disconnect from what he's doing. I think one of the issues with Elon Musk, I say like first name basis, me and Elon. But one of the issues with Elon Musk is that he's always on. And I don't know if you know much about him. You've read anything about him, but he certainly did strange things, like he'd sleep on the floor of the office. So, and he did it intentionally as well to let people know that like, I'm here. So if I'm here, you should be here. And I think that's unhealthy. So I'd do something that was very sort of nature driven, and give him like a sanctuary with water features and greenery and somewhere where he could just decompress.
Right.
You don't want my answer. I mean, I remember when you were reading a lot of his books, and I actually you recommended one to me.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, was I doing a lot of driving to Abu Dhabi at that time? I don't know. I downloaded it as an audiobook and I used to listen to it. I couldn't make it through. I couldn't. I don't know what it was. Like, it was the pace of the book, because the stories were interesting, but maybe the pace of the book or something. I stopped. I don't know. He's incredible as a character. I get it. And the things that he's achieved, like, no one can deny. They are incredible, but I just wasn't interested in that. The first thing that came to my head was something underground. Completely underground. Yeah, or send him to space. Something on the moon.
What would you do with Elon Musk?
I would send him. I would build a house for him on space. On the moon. Send him into space, or like some kind of a rocket ship where he can just go around.
Imagine this was like viral and he actually heard it.
I'm sure that he wouldn't, or he wouldn't even care. And I know I'm probably not the only person in the world that feels this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe something not in this world.
Fair enough. I think it's, I mean, when I read it the first time, it seemed like such a straightforward question, but now that I give it some thought,
it's a good question, actually.
Yeah, for the duration of, I mean, because I'm kind of a fan as well, a little bit. For the duration of, sort of SpaceX and things, he lived in a $40,000 house or something, like right next to, the place. He seems like he's not very concerned about where he lives. So it'd be quite interesting to design something for a person like that.
He lived in a car for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, his drive, and again, he's very polarized, and so I understand this, but his drive seems to be about the survival of humanity. Like he's misguided 100%, but his purpose has been unwavering. He wants to, he believes he's been put here to save humanity. He's going to make Mars inhabitable for us. And it's just interesting the way his mind works. And he's clearly a genius.
Yeah. But
he's also autistic. So the kind of combination, maybe he's sort of like an idiot savant. Sometimes he says these things and you think, really? But other times he does things and you think, wow, like that's unbelievable. But send him into space. Why not?
I think he'd like it.
I think we kind of need him.
Imagine the combination of our ideas, like a whole, like a mini planet, nature spaceship.
That's kind of what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
True. This has really been awesome. I think we can kind of talk about design indefinitely, which is awesome. I love having these conversations. For our guests, if they want to get in touch, we'll have, a couple of contacts linked down in the show notes, etc. And on behalf of the show, I really wanted to thank you for your time. I know that time is the one thing which is universal and highly scarce in this market. So the show is only possible because of people like yourself donating your time and sharing these experiences and learnings and so on. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's a nice start to a Wednesday.
Yeah. And time, incidentally, is not quite universal if you travel at the speed of light. Anyway, I'm not even going to go into that.
So that's the next episode. All right. Thank you so much once again. For the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aForm.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aForm.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.